Okay, the last section here is on heterotrophs, which consume energy-rich organic compounds, i.e. food, and convert them to usable energy, also known as ATP. Energy gain depends on the chemistry of the food and how much effort is needed to find and ingest food. So we can think about sort of like two different extremes. One is soil microbes that feed on detritus and invest little energy into finding food. They basically live where the food is, but the food has low energy content. Compared to something like a cheetah that expends a massive amount of energy to find, chase, and kill a gazelle, but it gets an energy-rich meal. So these are kind of two ends of the spectrum, both the apex predator versus a soil microbe. The constituents of food have varying energy content and ease of assimilation. Fiber compounds such as cellulose, most heterotrophs can't break down. Most of the energy we get, or animals get, heterotrophs get, is in carbohydrates, proteins, and especially fats. Amino acids also provide nitrogen. Secondary compounds are generally not a good source of energy and can be toxic. So this is an interesting way of thinking of food, and we can divide that food out into water and dry matter. That dry matter can be inorganic micro and macromolecules, and then organic matter such as fiber, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, other secondary compounds, different fatty acids, vitamins, other nutrients. Animal cells are generally more energy rich than plant, fungal, or bacteria cells, which tend to have more fiber. And herbivores generally eat more food to get the same benefit as carnivores do, but carnivores spend more energy finding food. So it's a bit of a trade-off between the herbivore and carnivore. You can think of pandas as an example. My Ada, my youngest daughter, loves pandas, and she likes to repeat that they eat 20 to 40 pounds of bamboo a day. They're not running around chasing down bamboo, but they live where their food source is. And 20 to 40 pounds for an animal that's 200 to 300 pounds is a lot of mass. Archaea, bacteria, and fungi excrete enzymes in the environment to break down organic matter, and then they digest the food outside their bodies. They've adapted to a wide variety of food sources and produce a variety of enzymes to break them down. So here it's excreting an enzyme that's doing the breaking down and then consuming the macronutrients after they've been broken down. The ability of microorganisms to be exploited for bioremediation. This is the use of microorganisms to break down things like fuels, pesticides, sewage. That can be cleaned up by microorganisms and break down these chemicals. One example is the Deepwater Horizon may have been lessened by marine microorganisms that were able to use the fuel as an energy source. This is also locally being used, or has been used, to do things like break down creosote logs, which are pilings. So they're effectively banned now, but for a long time, when you put a piling in the ocean or freshwater environments, you coat it in oil. It's called creosote, and that oil leaks out. So we have a lot of creosote logs floating around from old pylons and pylons that have been removed. There's different fungi that can break that down and release a non-toxic byproduct. So the evolution of mobility was probably associated with the need to find food sources and avoid being eaten by others. Plants don't need to run. Animals display tremendous diversity in specialized feeding adaptations, which reflects the diversity of foods they consume. And that diversity is underlying mechanisms for evolution. So all insects have effectively the same set of mouth parts, but these paired appendages used to capture, handle, and consume food have adapted to a wide variety of uses. And so you can think of something that's maybe chomping on plants directly and something that's poking you and sucking out your blood. They're effectively the same mouth parts, but they've adapted to different food sources. And that's one of the underlying kind of principles of evolution, is that organisms are able to adapt, and those adaptations have an advantage. And so birds is another classic example, even going back to Darwin and his finches. But birds have variation in their mouth parts, bills, and so these are all effectively the same body part. Bills, hummingbirds, gulls are different things that are consuming fish or other prey, and then you kind of have your seed and nut eaters. And in one example, the crossbills, in crossbills, Beckman showed that variation in bill morphology was related to the morphology of the dominant conifer trees. Really similar to Darwin's kind of finch story, but birds with bills best suited for the dominant cone type had the highest survival rates. And so if you're a bird that consumes the seeds within pine cones, the shape of your bill makes it much more efficient to, say, consume western hemlock seeds compared to South Hills lodgepole pine. And so that force has greatly impacted the way that these birds are diversifying. This is a kind of a cool 3D graph of bill depth and groove width. Let me move this text over. So basically how long and what the grooves look like, so they can get into these different pine cones. Heterotrophs have to transform food into simpler molecules. So heterotrophs have to have a digestion system, and that breaks down proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and then amino acids, simple sugars, and fatty acids. These are the building blocks for everything else. Digestion and absorption of food are important, so you need to break it down, and then you need to be able to absorb it. Small protozoans ingest food particles that are digested in special organelles. Multicellular organisms have specialized tissues that have evolved for the absorption, digestion, and transport and excretion, and the efficiency of energy assimilation is increased. Specialized organs based on the diet. The animal's diet influences these digestive adaptations. One example is given of a herbivore primate compared to humans, and the herbivore primate has a larger digestive system, so it gives more time for those nutrients to be absorbed because they're consuming an energy source that has less energy. They're consuming a food source that has less energy pound per pound, and so the ability to absorb those that food becomes really important. So if you're eating a diet that's less energy rich, being able to get all of the energy out of that food is really important. Extreme example of that are ruminants, cows, where they have special bacterial symbionts that enhance digestion. So we all have gut bacteria, but ruminants have a specialized stomach called a rumen, which in large populations of bacteria facilitate the breakdown of cellulose. Ruminants also exhibit rumination, cud chewing, regurgitation of material from the forestomach for added chewing. This makes sense, particularly because ruminants are typically prey items that you want to be able to go out, quickly consume as much organic or much plant matter as possible, and then move to a safer environment, chew that, and digest it throughout the evening and night. Organisms can acclimatize to eating different types of foods. Omnivores can adjust their digestive morphologies and produce different digestive enzymes. And this is true, like if you've ever switched your diet up greatly, it takes a while for your body to adjust. If you've gone from omnivore to vegetarian or vegan, or if you've cut out gluten or made any big dietary adjustments, it takes a while for your body to adjust to that. It takes a while for the, in our case, primarily gut microbes to adapt, to have the right kind of gut biota to break down those energy sources. And this is an example of warblers that spend the breeding season in North America eating mostly insects. In the winter, they migrate to Central America, where they eat mostly fruit and nectar. And experiments with captive warblers showed an increase in fat absorption efficiency and lipase concentrations in birds that were fed a high-fat diet. So the efficiency of fat absorption is higher with seeds. The mean food retention, again, is a bit higher with seeds, and then lipase activity kind of varies. And so fruits are generally lower in fat, and they kind of process a bit faster. Organisms can acclimatize to eating different food. Oh, went the wrong way. So that sounds familiar. So again, here the big thing is this lipase activity is increased with higher fat foods, and so they're able to produce an enzyme that helps break down fats. So it's a quick bit about heterotrophs, and most of this is kind of on plants and a bit on heterotrophs and how heterotrophs adapt to consuming different amounts of food, and how that different types of food is also an evolutionary pressure.